So I remember when I first started Magic, and I had this very, very specific sort of line of thought, and it's that I wouldn't use any gaffs or gimmicks. And it wasn't because they were necessarily bad, but because old me still had that very Asian mindset. I know I know it sounds pretty bad, but back then, I was essentially like, I had this very, very specific mindset where I was like, okay, no shortcuts for everything, always do everything like until everything is perfect, and then do all the difficult stuff so then you can sort of stand above the rest of everyone else. And that is a very, very sort of Asian mindset, right? You just want to like, everything is like skill based, everything has to be perfect, everything is like refined to such a high degree and stuff like that. And you can sort of see this mindset still bleed into my modern work, where you see all these difficult moves being posted. And even now when I practice things, I'm still trying to do like riffle stacking and stuff like that without looking at my hands and stuff like that. So you can tell that I'm still very much so in that mindset. But how has my sort of point of view in gimmicks and gaffs sort of changed over the years? Because even though I still sort of practice sleight of hand and I still do all these difficult moves, my mindset on gaffs and gimmicks has definitely changed over these sort of past few years. Chris Rems actually made a similar video to this where he was sort of discussing gimmicks. And back then, that was like 8 years ago, I actually left a comment, and I quote, "I don't have a gimmick and don't plan on getting one. I find magicians are leaning too much on gimmicks these days, so I try what I can with a normal deck of cards." Unquote. What a bold statement, and that is very much so in line with the way that I used to think. Just to clarify a couple of things. Yes, I'm still very much so slight leaning. I still think that, I still everything that I do still revolves around sleights. That has not changed whatsoever. But two, I think it's actually fine to just use gaffs and gimmicks nowadays. I think there's fundamentally two things that I also realized as I started sort of getting more and more into Magic. So one thing is that we don't actually perform magic for ourselves. We actually just perform magic for other people. We can practice for ourselves, which is what most of like what I do is actually. So if I'm actually like practicing riffle stacking and stuff like that, people will never see that, right? People will never see me do riffle stacking because it's just not really the type of thing that I need to show to people, and it's not really magic related, it's more gambling related. Obviously there's like magic applications, but it's mostly going to be gambling sleight of hand that uses things like riffle stacking and whatnot. But ultimately, you don't practice, you don't really perform for yourself. You perform for an audience members, and regardless of the methods, you just want the best for the spectators. And sometimes that might involve a cleaner method which has a gaff or a gimmick, or just sleight, or the method revolves around sleights and stuff like that. So you just want the best, right? It's not about you when you're performing, it's about the spectator. And then two, methods are just that, methods. They are just tools at the end of the day, and they're tools for you to accomplish those effects. But of course, those tools have limits. We aren't actually like magicians, right? We aren't wizards. We can't literally just change a card at our fingertips and stuff like that. Those things have methods, and those things have limits. We aren't breaking the laws of physics, and we have physical limitations as to everything that we do because it's playing cards, right? It's just playing cards, it's all manipulation and stuff like that. So every method has its limits. If we take a look at sleight of hand, there are things that sleight of hand can't do versus things that gaffs and gimmicks can do. For example, if you want to vanish a card from the bottom to the top, that's something that only gimmicks can do. And if you want to make a sleight easier, for example, a deck switch, there are of course deck switches that don't revolve around sort of gimmicks and stuff like that. But there are easier methods out there that have the assistance of a gaff or gimmick and just make the whole process more streamlined. There are less things to sort of consider and stuff like that. So there are things that gimmicks and gaffs can do that sleight of hand can't. And of course you can use gaffs and gimmicks to elevate sleight of hand. On the flip side, of course, there are things that sleight of hand can do that gaffs and gimmicks can't. So for example, you can't just get rid of a gimmick, right? Like, of course, you can use maybe like for smaller gimmicks, you can obviously just like use like double-sided tape to sort of just hide it in the deck and whatever, right? But if it comes to like a more intricate gimmick and stuff like that, sometimes you have to palm the gimmick off. Sometimes you have to get rid of it some way, and more often than not, those methods revolve around sleight of hand. And these two things exist because we need methods to accomplish our effects. And the two actually just exist because they cover each other's weaknesses. Sometimes they exist because the other just can't do the thing that the other can do. So nowadays, I actually don't really see gaffs and gimmicks and sleights as opposing forces. I actually see them as complementary, because you can use one, you can use the other, but of course at the end of the day, they elevate each other. But even with this sort of new point of view, I still don't really use gaffs and gimmicks all that often these days, unless an effect can only be done using a certain gaff or gimmick. Because yeah, if it's a good effect, why not use it? I mean, having a gaff or a gimmick is just sort of a small compromise in my eyes. And of course, again, they are complementary with one another, so if my sleight of hand is good, I can always just get rid of the gimmick and all that stuff. But during my free time, if an effect can only be done with a gaff or a gimmick, I'll usually just tinker around with the effect. I'll just probably cook up the most convoluted method possible at doing the same effect but without a gaff or a gimmick, because it's fun. It is fun, and like I said, usually I do practice for myself. No one's gonna see the more convoluted method unless it's a fellow magician and stuff like that. But yeah, and it's still very much so in line with how I handle magic and how I sort of think about magic, just having everything mechanical and stuff like that. So that's where I'm at when it comes to integrating gaffs and gimmicks into my effects. Someone isn't necessarily less skilled or taking the easy route because they're using gaffs and gimmicks. They're just using the trades of the tools of the trade. Sorry, that's a proper expression. They're just using the tools of the trade. Like, at the end of the day, again, like I said, we are performing for other people. We aren't performing for ourselves. We can practice for ourselves, like again, riffle stacking, bottom deals, and stuff like that. I never use those moves in my routines, but I still practice them because it's what makes me happy. But it's not what makes the audience happy, so you know. But of course, gaffs and gimmicks, they are just tools, right? Just like sleight of hand. And if a particular sort of method can be used to accomplish those effects, why not use them? But ultimately, it is your choice. You can be a sleight of hand purist like me. You can choose to integrate both gaffs and gimmicks into your sleight of hand and then into your effects. You can choose to be a move monkey, or you can just choose to whip out the gaffs and gimmicks only when you need specific effects, but practice sleight of hand. That's also what I do. But yeah, at the end of the day, gaffs, gimmicks, sleights, they're all just tools to help us make effects, to help us accomplish effects, and to help us make the best possible effect possible for our audience members. Why not use the tools that we have? Why not use every tool that we have in our arsenal to their full potential? Because, like I said, like, we are performing for other people, not for ourselves. But yeah, so that is where I'm currently at. Yeah. I still very much so have that sort of Asian mindset of just like, yeah, just practice all the difficult stuff, make it perfect and stuff like that. But I'm a lot more lenient towards gaffs and gimmicks nowadays, and I don't see any shame in using gaffs and gimmicks. It is, again, like I said, just personal choice, and yeah, it's magic. It's how you perform, it's how you present your magic that really matters. It's just entertainment at the end of the day. Just make sure to have fun with your performances and all that stuff. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for me today. That is just my updated point of view on gaffs and gimmicks, because like I said, 8 years ago, pretty immature. But yeah, point of views can change, people can change and stuff like that. So yeah, let me know what your stance is on gaffs and gimmicks and all that these days. And yeah, if you want, you can come back and update me on how your point of view has changed, or yeah, just let me know your experiences. And so yeah, hope you guys just stay safe, stay healthy, and see you guys in the next one.